to Ycft. It has been 20 years since Dark Castle released. Gothika, starring Halle Berry as... What's the character's name? Is it
Miranda Gray.
Miranda Gray.
Dr. Miranda
Gray, who is a psychologist at this women's institute.
Yes.
Who, after having to take a slightly different route home, leads to having a car accident that somehow results in a loss of memory and her waking up as a patient in her own place of work.
Mm-hmm.
With some potentially supernatural elements at play as well as some foul play, she has to try and work out what has happened.
Yeah.
What has happened to land her here, and how can she clear herself?
Yeah.
Of this crime that she has apparently committed. That's basically all I really need. Like, this is very much more your film than mine.
Okay.
I've only watched this twice. I do enjoy it, but this is your film. So it's like I'm basically clocking out.
David's got his run.
Yeah, it's a Sunday night. This is the last shoot of the day.
All right, well, hang on a minute. Right, we just want to prove it. You do enjoy this movie.
Oh yeah, I do enjoy it.
It is very much like I've been. Okay, just a quick little backstory into Sam's life. This is the first movie that I remember watching at the time it was released. Like, it was the first horror movie I remember watching. It was released in 2003. It was released in the UK in 2004, which would have been like around the time I saw it. So yeah, I would have been 10, like 9 or 10. And it was the first horror movie that I kind of became obsessed with. And my mum, she had seen it and she didn't want me to see it because of the themes of the movie. But you know, it was like the horror film when it was released. So this was the one that me and my girlfriends, when we were sleeping over at each other's houses, like we'd sneakily watch and we'd get scared. And my love of horror was already kind of building, but it was kind of cemented with this film. So when people ask me like the first horror I saw, I always kind of credit Gothika with it, and I've kind of been obsessed with it ever since. And it's such a weird, obscure little film from 2003, like a kind of, you know, a throwaway little horror movie. It's a weird one to be obsessed with, but I am, because it's like at the same time it's popped up in my life at random intervals, and it's like the kind of movie that, you know, will disappear for a while, and then, you know, I'll rediscover it and I'll fall in love with it all over again. And it played an important part of my life when I was at university, which I'll maybe get into if I revisit it. But yeah, I really love this film, and my nostalgia for it aside, my history with it aside, I do genuinely think this is a very underrated movie. And it's been nice to see a lot of big horror YouTubers, like the ones that I'm aware of anyway, over the years, like also kind of revisiting it and giving it the benefit of the doubt, and all them coming to a similar conclusion in that, you know what, actually, like, it doesn't stand out, like it doesn't do anything majorly different, but it's still a good film. And it's currently rated 14% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is criminal, deserves infinitely more than that. And it's 20 years. It's literally like 20 years old this month, I think. So what better time than to celebrate its 20-year-old birthday than for us to chat about it?
Like I said, it was produced by Dark Castle.
This is a Dark Castle movie.
Do you want to tell the fans about... We briefly touched on this when we did Orphan First Kill.
Yes.
I feel now is the perfect time for you to dive into what is Dark Castle, who's involved in it, and the type of movies that they made.
Sure. So at the top of Dark Castle, at the helm of it, is Joel Silver, who is still a very prolific movie producer. He did some classic movies over the years. He did Predator, he's done the Lethal Weapon series, big player in Hollywood. And he's also a horror fan. So in, I think, the late 90s, he, alongside his other production company, Silver Pictures, he created Dark Castle Entertainment. Now, the initial purpose of Dark Castle was to specifically remake William Castle movies. William Castle, we've talked about in the past, was a big horror movie director and horror movie mogul from the 50s and the 60s, and made films like House on Haunted Hill. He made The Tingler. He made 13 Ghosts, and to varying degrees of success, but he was, he's a cult filmmaker. He's very, very well known, especially in horror circles. And obviously, the clue is in the name, Dark Castle. It's a homage to William Castle. So the intention was they were going to remake William Castle movies, bring them up to date, and introduce them to a modern audience. So right off the bat, I think it's quite a respectful endeavor. It's like, obviously, it's a production company. They want to cash in. Like, the aim of the game is to make money. But they did it with, I quite like the purpose of it. To make William Castle movies more accessible to audiences of the early 2000s. And they got off to a pretty good start. They remade House on Haunted Hill, classic Vincent Price movie. They remade it with Geoffrey Rush in the Vincent Price role. I personally think that film is dog shit, but I actually don't know how well it did financially, but I'm going to assume it did quite well. It's not considered one of the best, but there are fans of it out there. And then they kind of knocked it out the park when they did 13 Ghosts, which to this day is it's a very beloved film. Like, it's obviously very flawed, but, it has its fans. Very recently announced that they're going to do a TV show revisiting the lives of the ghosts and the past lives of the ghosts, which is, I think, what fans have been crying out for over 20 years.
A lot of fans have wanted that for years because
I
think a feature that came with a DVD of that went into the backstory of all the ghosts and was like, well, this is what we wanted to see.
Yes,
so
exactly.
They're finally giving us what we wanted with that film.
Totally. And like the Dark Castle 13 Ghosts is miles apart from the original William Castle film. But again, like, that was the purpose. They wanted to remake the films, but also put their own unique spin on it. So anyway, in the early 2000s, Dark Castle, they remake a lot of William Castle movies. And then kind of very quickly, they start creating their own IPs. So we get a movie released in 2002 called Ghost Ship, which I absolutely adore, and you can guarantee we're going to be doing a video on that maybe next year. I'm going to call that in. That's my birthday request.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so we can look forward to that. Ghost Ship is not a remake of a William Castle film. It's very much Dark Castle's own movie. So very kind of quickly, I don't actually know the reason why, but they just started producing their own stuff on top of William Castle stuff. So yeah, Ghost Ship was 2002, and then in 2003 they make Gothika, which again, its own IP, not connected to William Castle at all, very much Dark Castle's own movie. As David was saying, it focuses on Miranda Gray, who is played by Halle Berry, an Oscar-winning Halle Berry at this point. She'd recently won for Monsters Ball, so very much established as like a dramatic actress. Like, Halle didn't need to prove that she could act. Like, I've always really liked her. I think she's great in this film. I think a lot of people have a few issues with her in it.
It is interesting placed in between Monsters Ball and Catwoman.
And Catwoman, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I don't know the timeline exactly. She might have said yes to this before Monsters Ball had been released. Like, I'm not too sure. But anyway, this came hot on the heels of Monsters Ball, and the cast of this is stellar. But it is essentially about Halle being accused of this particular crime. She's incarcerated in her own penitentiary, and she has to try and clear her name of this crime that there's solid evidence to say that she committed. And we have, along with Halle, we've got Penelope Cruz, we have Charles S. Dutton, we have John Carroll Lynch, we've got Bernard Hill, and we have Robert Downey Jr.
Tell them a little bit about Robert Downey in this particular time of his life.
I do. It's an interesting one. So again, this is 2002, 2003 when they're making this film. Downey was not doing the best at that time. This is pre-Iron Man. Like, this is pre his solid comeback.
Was it before Kiss Kiss Bang Bang?
This is before Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, yeah. So he'd always been cushy with Joel Silver. I think the two of them were friends. Joel Silver had produced a lot of Downey's films in the past. Like, Silver had worked with Downey since the 80s. So they'd always had like a fairly kind of cozy working relationship. But it was around the time where Downey, he was not doing well. He was technically uninsurable. No one wanted to bank on Robert Downey Jr. He was also fresh out of rehab as well, so not the best time to employ Robert Downey Jr. But Silver wanted him. He wanted him in this part, and he was very honest with Downey, and he was like, look, I'm making this horror movie. I want to offer you a part. It's not a big part. It's a couple of weeks at most. You're not going to get a penny until you finished all your scenes, because you're going to have to prove that you are reliable and you will show up to work every day and you will know your lines and all of that stuff. And Downey agreed. Co-producing this film, or actually, no, sorry. She co-produced Ghost Ship. She was actually a full producer on Gothika. Producing alongside Silver was a young producer called Susan Levin, who had been working at Dark Castle for a few years. Even though she was producer, she also has been very honest with the fact that her main job was to basically be on set every day just to make sure that Downey was behaving himself. And anyway, the two of them met on this movie, and I think they recently celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. They've been with each other ever since. Downey credits Susan for his sobriety. They've got 2 kids together. I think they've been together, for a very, very long time. And it's a nice love story in Hollywood, amidst all the breakups that go on and all the scandals. It's like Robert and Susan seem to be, they're the real deal. Yeah. But yeah, I love the fact that they met on this film, like this seemingly kind of inconsequential movie for the two of them. But, they met and fell in love during it. So it's a special movie for that alone.
Well, Susan ended up basically running Dark Castle, didn't she?
She became oh my god, she became like the head of development or something like that.
Because they are still running today.
It still runs, yeah. They recently did Orphan.
Yeah, well, yeah, Orphan first. Because they did the first Orphan as well, I imagine.
Yeah, they did.
So I know they updated the logo for that, and that's the one when you look on Wikipedia. It's the new coloured logo. Every film they had the October slot. They wanted to release a film every October.
Yes.
Well, because of an accident on set with Downey, again, not really his fault. Like this scene where he has to restrain Hollywood just being just losing her shit because she's woke up in her own asylum.
Yeah.
And he kind of had to push her arms down, and I think the way she twisted it, the way he pushed down, broke her elbow.
Yeah.
I think it was. So basically shut down production for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So the film had to be pushed to November, and I don't think Silver never quite had the drive to hit the October slot after that. But interesting, it only just came to mind when you were talking through that in 2004, another film took that Halloween slot that kind of held it for a few years, and that's Saw.
Very true.
It's always a very competitive slot, and there's that accident on set kind of derailed
that goal.
That goal that they had. But when you said this has 14%, and I know should they ever wanted to nominate her for a Razzie, or she was nominated for a Razzie, she doesn't deserve that. I think she does a very good job in this with the material that she has.
Definitely.
The film looks it's got a really interesting, because I know specifically you wanted to go for, do you have the director?
Matthew Kassovitz.
They particularly wanted a more European
they did.
look. You wanted to be more of a slow burn instead of, in his words, big, American and loud.
Yeah, this is coming from Silver, and he's spoken in the past about he, again, the horror fan, how American movies, especially in the early 2000s, movies that he himself had produced, were kind of big and very bold, whereas the European sensibilities with horror movies is kind of the opposite. Traditionally very sort of understated, and a lot of focus on cinematography and atmosphere. And that's kind of what they were going for in Gothika. So there was a bit of method in deliberately hiring a European director. I think we have a European cinematographer as well, and that is always a standout in this movie.
I do think they could have upped the saturation just a little bit.
Maybe.
It is a very grey and dark blues, but I want to shout out Penelope Cruz in this. I think she's brilliant. And when she has a conversation when she's basically saying that no matter what she says, it's now all part of her illness.
Yes.
No one can believe a word she says, because they all assume if she says something outlandish and crazy, they just assume, oh, well, she's crazy.
Yeah.
And the film follows a lot of themes that we see with these type of movies set in asylums, is people in power abusing their power, especially when it comes to female inmates.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot of, I think when you start looking at it at that level, the film does have a message. And it's a pretty dark message. And as it, just if they're not following, I really like that. I like that they just chose to take that type of situation on.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're not sugarcoat. They literally they lay it all out. This is happening.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, the very first piece of dialogue that we have in the movie is a therapy session between Halle Berry and Penelope Cruz, characters called Chloe, and Chloe, she's talking to Miranda, confiding in this what Miranda perceives to be a fantasy like the ramblings of a deluded imagination, but talking about sexual assault. Can I say that?
SA?
She's talking about SA.
As a non-monetized channel, I think we're okay
Yeah.
with most things, but yeah, we'll play it safe.
We'll play it safe. But she's reiterating this thing that is happening to her in her cell, and obviously Miranda is just kind of, she's scribbling it all down, and she's, you know, thinking about what medication she can prescribe Chloe. And Chloe says to her, you know, like, you're listening with your head, but you're not listening with your heart. Like, you're not listening to what I'm actually telling you, which is that I am being abused, and you're not listening. And that is a recurring thing that happens throughout the movie. And, you know, I there's going to be a lot of people out there that are like, you can't take a film called Gothika very seriously. You can't look too deeply into it. You know, it's 2000s film. But you're right. There is a very serious message that, you know, the film focuses on, and a lot of it is about, people abusing their positions of power, especially in hospitals and mental asylums, but also this theme of women not being believed. You know, it's there's a reason that they chose for it to be a female penitentiary for the criminally insane. And, you know, Chloe, Miranda, like, they both fall victim to this kind of prejudice, I guess, this discrimination of people not believing them. And it also extends into the supernatural as well. Miranda becomes convinced that she's being haunted by this girl spirit, and obviously no one believes her. They think she's totally deluded. But I also think one of the biggest strengths of the film is that blend of the psychological and the supernatural. Again, a lot of people kind of have a bit of fault with how clunkily the supernatural is integrated with it. Arguably, this film could exist as a purely psychological movie. You didn't necessarily need the supernatural stuff, but I really like it. I think it adds a lot to it.
Yeah.
The ghost of Rachel scared the shit out of me when I was 10, and she always kind of will.
So after she has to take the diversion, and it is the ghost of Rachel that appears in the middle of the road that leads to her having the accident.
Yeah.
Then she goes out, tries to talk to this girl, and she just bursts into flames.
Yes.
She then wakes up in a cell
Yeah.
a few days later after having murdered her husband with an axe.
Butchered. Yeah.
Yes.
Butchered Doug.
Absolutely butchered Doug. And she has no memory of this.
No, not at all.
At all. And I always really like the scene she has with Downey when she obviously knows what he's going to say to her because it's what she would say. And I think they always kind of like play a game of chess almost.
Almost, yeah. Yeah, he's still treating her with respect. Like, he's acting with caution, but he's still treating her like a doctor. You know, he's like, I know you know what I'm doing here, and why am I telling you this? Why am I telling you this in this way?
And it's like he gets frustrated because whenever you start making sense, you start talking about ghosts.
Every time people start taking you seriously, you want to start talking about all these delusions again.
I'm not deluded, Pete. I'm possessed.
I don't believe in ghosts.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't help you if you don't help me.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to help her. There is an ulterior motive as to why he really wants to help her.
Oh, he's basically in love with her.
He's absolutely in love with her, and there's a scene that I really like with Downey and Berry after she's been attacked by the ghost of Rachel in the showers, the communal showers, which I have no idea if that's like an actual thing in hospitals, but it seems a bit very archaic to do it that way.
Well, that's how she ends up with the not alone carved into her arm, and it's like, oh, she did this herself. It's like, what?
Please explain how she did that to herself. Where was she hiding that scalpel on her naked body?
One problem I think a lot of people point out is there's absolutely no way she'd be locked up in a place where she'd worked.
Okay.
Because that is massive conflict of interest with her other patients. It's instantly going to put her in an unsafe situation.
Yeah.
It's just, I also don't think she'd be committed that quickly.
No.
Is this within a matter of days she's been committed to a mental asylum? It wouldn't happen.
No.
I think she absolutely would have just been locked up in a prison at first.
More than likely.
For sure. But they would have had her she'd have to be in a separate institute.
Yeah.
But for the story to happen, I get it. And they continues a theme on from 13 Ghosts that I really like. A theme of like glass walls.
Oh,
like a lot of the doors to the cells are the glass. Keeping that dark castle aesthetic that I really liked.
Totally. Yeah, I think those
Water's a big theme of this as well, isn't it? Rain, water and rain.
yeah, definitely. It's for me. This is like the perfect movie to watch on like a dark, stormy night in November. You know, it's great. Got very classic gothic aesthetic. But yeah, those 2 points that you mentioned where logic kind of falls apart. I think they're the two biggest criticisms that critics had at the time. Just saying like right away, it's implausible as to how the plot unfolds because arguably, no, in real life she wouldn't be held in the place of where she works. It would interfere with her former patient's recovery, and yeah, arguably maybe she would have been arrested. I can't remember if it... Okay, so also, I printed off the script for this film years ago, like the height of my obsession. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me. But the script is a lot longer than what we see in the film, and a lot of scenes were cut. But I can't remember if it was explained in the script initially, but I think they do kind of imply that the reason that they're able to hold her and she's not in prison is because the head of the institution has pulled a few strings and says, you know, like, we need to assess her before you can actually arrest her. Something like that is said. But yeah, it's the movie, guys.
But like with Chloe, once she's in there and she's sort of trying to explain her side of things, also while having not remembered a lot, no one's going to believe her because they see her as mentally ill.
Yes.
And when we were discussing this, it reminds me, I'm trying to pull something from A-level psychology, so you have to forgive me for not knowing names of studies. But apparently there was a study in the 70s where there was a lot of people claiming insanity and going into mental asylums, like either because it was just easier, because you get like 3 square meals a day, you know, maybe it's just real life was just too hard.
Yeah.
So this group of scientists went and got themselves committed. And they said getting in was incredibly easy, but getting out was so difficult, again, because everything they said was then just
used against No.
Probably because they couldn't deal with the influx that they were getting. I really wish I could remember the name of the study. I remember learning about it in class and being like baffled, absolutely baffled by it. But I could see it when watching this movie, when she's trying to explain, she knows in herself that she hasn't done this.
Yeah.
But to everyone else, she's just the crazy lady who killed her husband with an axe.
Absolutely.
Like, and then had a psychotic break afterwards.
Yeah, and she says time and time again, she's like, yeah, I was there, and people did probably hear me screaming, and you did find me at the scene of the crime, because maybe I went into shock, and the reason I can't remember is because I'm in total, like, denial about what I've seen. And she's trying to apply logic to this situation, but she keeps saying, like, she doesn't have a motive. She loved her husband. They had a great marriage. They had a great relationship, and a bit dodgy that he was her boss at the end of the day, but still a loving marriage. So that's the one thing that she has. She's like, I had no reason to do this. And she remembers, like, pieces of that night come back to her in stages, and she remembers seeing the girl at the side of the road, the girl that was clearly in distress. And no one's listening to her. Everyone thinks that she imagined this girl. And the knot alone that's scraped into her arm in the shower scene, that's something that comes up a few times. And even Miranda, when she finally has, like, dream flashbacks of seeing herself there, she does actually remember being the one with the axe and killing her husband. She thinks in her mind that the knot alone means that she wasn't there alone, that there was someone else with her that helped her do the killing.
Or the not alone, that the victim, well, because she realizes that the girl she's seeing is the person who runs, basically her husband's boss. Bernard Hill. It's his daughter.
Yes,
Rachel. Who had died in an accident.
They believe that she killed herself 4 years ago. She died... That spot where Miranda saw her, that's where Rachel killed herself. Drowned.
Yeah. We're going to get into heavy spoilers
Yes.
for this. This ghost, Rachel, is
Following Miranda.
and pushing her in the right direction. Sometimes shoving her in the right direction.
Getting a bit arsey with Miranda.
Yeah, but then isn't really being extremely clear, because not alone is not an easy message to go off.
No.
Really. And Miranda does escape.
With the help of Rachel.
With the help of Rachel. Also, because she starts getting flashes of what happened that night when she goes back to her home. Right, as soon as she escaped, why were the police not there?
At the house.
At the house.
Like, where could she possibly want to go?
Yeah.
Maybe a house? No one thought that.
No one thought that. And she from there goes to a farmhouse that her husband owned that she'd been to before. I think the ghost kind of points it out.
The ghost sort of leads her there, yeah.
Shall I reveal?
Yes, do it.
She finds out when she's there, a hidden room underneath one of the barns with a bed, with chains, and a camera. It still has batteries in it, and with a bunch of, like, a table full of, like, sedatives. This is when she finds out that her husband had been kidnapping people. And you can imagine, like, I don't have to hold your hand.
The video cameras
filming himself. Yeah. Not only that, but one of the victims is still there.
Is still very much alive.
Because obviously the police turn up there, and that's why, like, she basically saves this woman's life because she's been locked down there for so long.
Yeah.
And this is where I think if there wasn't a supernatural twist, you could still make this work. Because then she could have just had a psychotic breakdown, and then after, if she'd found this out earlier, you can imagine that she would just go ape shit on her husband.
Oh, totally.
But she was possessed by Rachel to take revenge for what happened to her. Yeah. So the reason she can't remember is because she literally wasn't in control.
No.
But I do think there's a way they could have done it where she wasn't possessed. She could have literally just had a psychotic break.
She could have. That's what I mean. Like, arguably, there is, like, an edit of this a version of this movie that could exist without the supernatural plot line.
You just need a reason for the doors to start opening.
Exactly. Yeah, because the ghost does ultimately help Miranda escape. Like, the ghost literally opens her door at one point. The ghost shoves Miranda, throws her about the room, knowing that the guards are going to see this on the camera and open the doors, and therefore enabling her to escape. So Rachel does help, albeit in a very clunky way. It's kind of unclear ultimately, like, what Rachel's relationship with Miranda is. It's like, is she just genuinely trying to, like, make her see clarity and sense, or is she actually is part of her angry with Miranda that she's not seeing
I think
it?
Because it turns out that Bernard Hill's character used to also have the same dream of her on fire.
Yeah, a girl.
But he started taking medication to forget it, which is very Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the medication in those films, but they have medication to make dreams go away. So imagine if she's tried to tell the story to her father and he's not listening, maybe she thought she had to be more brutal with her response this time round.
Maybe, yeah, exactly.
But obviously it very much leads on to there had to be more than one person, because Chloe has been getting harassed while she's in solitary confinement, and clearly not the first time. And Miranda sees this, but at first only sees a tattoo of a woman in flames.
On the chest of a man.
On the chest of a man.
A big burly man.
A big burly man, and that is revealed to be Doug's best friend, who is the sheriff. That I do really like the scene where he likes it. All right, if there was another person, what could you tell me about him? So she kind of like analyzes the type of person it could be, and you can kind of, in that moment,
you can see the light bulb go off.
The light bulb go off, and he's like kind of like listening to himself, and he's like, listen, yeah.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I see how I would fit the profile. Yeah, like he's actually fucking enjoying it. Sheriff Ryan is played by John Carroll Lynch.
He's a great actor.
Who is phenomenal. I will forever love him because he is in Zodiac. He plays Arthur Lee Allen. I love him. He's appeared in obviously like a bunch of other stuff. Great character actor, but he's really good in this. But yeah, like
so they were like childhood friends, weren't they? Him and Doug.
They've been childhood friends, and Ryan reveals to Miranda that him and Doug have been kidnapping and killing women for a fairly long period of time. Then Doug met Miranda, decided to stop the killing until he met Rachel, his boss's daughter. And I think as Ryan describes it, she was an itch too good not to scratch or something
Oh,
like
it's
that.
horrible.
So that's what kicked it off again. And Doug purchasing Willow Creek, which is the barn, like obviously the perfect hideout, like him and Ryan are going there under the pretense of like going fishing, whereas we know actually what they're doing. It's very, very seedy and it is very depressing. And in hindsight, I totally understand why my mum did not want me to watch this movie, because it is very dark. Like when the twist comes, like I can totally understand some people might see some kind of twist coming. Like ultimately there has to be a reason why Doug is dead and he's been killed in such a vicious way. Like he must have done something, right? But I still think that when the revelation of that room and the video camera, and when you see just, you know, Hallie's eyes just kind of widen in shock and horror at what she's seeing, like it's a lot. And I really like the twist. I love the fact that there's, you know, two of them, and that's the real meaning of what Not Alone is. Like there wasn't just one killer, there were two.
Yeah.
And one is, you know, very much still harassing the female patients. And that's the thing, because he's the sheriff, it's not really explained in the movie, but he has access to the penitentiary, and he's taken a liking to Chloe.
Yeah.
But Rachel also, you know, helps point Miranda in that direction. She's trying to tell her, you know, like, this is still happening, you've got to do something about this.
An interesting one we talked about after the movie is, because after this all comes out, after the sheriff's killed, obviously Rachel being on fire is meant to represent his tattoo.
Yeah.
He ends up dying by fire, which is quite poetic.
Yeah.
But then like, it cuts to a year later, and both Chloe and Rachel have obviously been released. Miranda. I had to say Rachel and Chloe.
Yeah. Rachel's dead.
Miranda and Chloe have been released. So Chloe probably because, let's be fair, that's a lawsuit.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. But then it's a question of like, she did still kill her husband.
Yeah.
And we discussed like, I imagine it probably went along the path of temporary insanity after a good lawyer would be like, oh, so you found out what your husband was doing and in a moment of madness you murdered him. That's how they must have went down that route to get her out of this, because I'm pretty sure temporary insanity is a thing.
Yeah. And you can imagine, like, the alternative is what? Like, they went to trial and said, oh, we're sorry, Your Honour, but my client was possessed by a supernatural entity of one of his previous victims to take revenge on him. Yeah. That's not going to go down well.
She saved a woman.
She did. She saved a woman's life.
Obviously saved the well-being of a lot of people in the institution.
Yes.
Solved a 10-year-old case.
Yeah. I think maybe also something that they could have done is the night that Miranda killed Doug, because her prints were on the weapon. Like Rachel had to possess Miranda to kill Doug. So Halle Berry was absolutely there. Like there's no doubt about it. She killed her husband. But in terms of, you know, trying to help her case, they could have maybe also said that perhaps that night Doug tried to kill Miranda. Maybe Doug made a move on Miranda.
Maybe.
And that's what kicked it off.
It's kind of the problem I have towards the end of the movie.
It's a bit ambiguous.
There is a point after the barn where this like nice slow burn, fairly sweet space of I'm like, whoa, slow. You didn't prep me for this change in pace.
Slow down, yeah.
And then the movie's over. I'm like, because she's still seeing ghosts at the end, and it's like, well, you said it kind of feels like she's going to go and help people in her own way. Now that door's open, it sometimes it's hard to close.
I've always felt like that. Yeah, like the almost like an epilogue is she waves goodbye to Chloe. You know, there's implication that they're going to stay friends, or, you know, at least like they're going to look out for each other in the future. And Miranda's walking off and she sees a little boy in the middle of the road, and there's a truck coming, and she screams for the boy to get out of the way, and the truck just passes through the boy. And then we see
the missing poster.
Yeah, the missing poster of that same kid, and she just kind of wanders off in shock. And then it ends, and we get that fantastic Behind Blue Eyes cover by Limp Bizkit, which is fucking incredible. But I since the very first day I saw this film, I've always felt the same thing in, like, she realises that she now has the ability to see dead people, and she's going to carry on what she was doing prior to all of this, just in a different way. I mean, she's a psychiatrist, you know, like she helped people, she was a doctor, that's what she did. But now she's just going to do it. There's a different twist on it now. maybe she can't practice medicine again. Maybe she doesn't want to. I don't know, like, if the license is going to be revoked after everything that's happened. But I do get the impression that she's going to use this gift to carry on helping people. That's
Probably
that's
more like the
how I see
Frighteners.
it.
At that point.
I guess maybe a little bit like the Frighteners, yeah.
Yeah. So it did, obviously, critically did not do well. But I think commercially it did fairly well, didn't it?
Oh, it did very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did very well. I don't have the exact box office results, but it did pretty well. It was a big movie at the time of its release. I mean, you look at the cast alone.
Yeah, the cast is spectacular.
This has star quality behind it. Like, again, Downey is not a main character, but like, he still had some sway to him. Even in 2003, Penelope Cruz was huge. Halle Berry, as I say, like, she was hot off the heels of Monsters Ball, like her Oscar-winning performance. It was big names attached to it, and the aesthetic, the production design, it deserves more than 40%.
I do enjoy this film. I think the problem, again, because I didn't grow up with it. As I only watched it for the first time like last year,
Because of me.
maybe even the year before. And when I watch it, I enjoy it,
Yeah.
but I've not got that attachment to it. So if you ever want to watch it, I would watch it.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be something I would suggest.
It is a dark
watching.
film as well.
It's not an easy watch.
It's by no means an
It's
easy
also,
watch.
to look at, is a dark film.
Yeah. Just talk briefly about the name, Gothika. It always intrigued me because in many ways it's a ridiculous title for a film.
But it has a meaning, doesn't it?
It
We found it
kind of
actually does have
does.
meaning.
Kind of does. It's like Gothika is like obviously it's a play on the word gothic, but it's like a state of like a purgatorial state of mind or something like that, to be traumatized or to be stuck mentally in like this very disturbed place. But it's very unique, but I also think it really suits the movie. And in many ways, like, this is a very 2003 film. Like, you get that kind of like flashy editing in some scenes, like in the flashback sequences, the dream sequences.
Yeah, the
like,
stroke-inducing editing.
Yeah, you get a little bit of that.
The phones.
Yeah, the phones. And the fashion, like, she's got her bootcut jeans and whatnot. Some standalone scenes that I really like, the pool sequence.
Yeah, which was the first one or the second one?
The second one.
Which was added in for tension.
Yeah.
Apparently, that was not initially in the script.
She's escaped from her cell. She's hiding from the guards. She's trying to get out of the asylum, and she's kind of stuck. And she scoops down into the pool, and she's holding her breath, really holding her breath, and she's got her eyes closed, and then she opens her eyes, and then the ghost of Rachel just very unhelpfully just kind of screams
Rachel is
at her
the
face.
least helpful. The only
Really?
good thing she did was open the cell.
Yeah, honestly.
The rest of the time, she's just a hindrance.
But I have to say, like, that scene...
There's easier ways to convince someone to help you than making them crash their car.
Totally. Oh, no, I absolutely get it. But that scene in the pool... So, again, I said that this is a film that I used to watch with my friends when I was little, a sleepover. I was chatting to a childhood friend of mine quite recently and talking about horror films, and Gothika was brought up. Now, my friend has not seen this movie in almost 20 years. And as soon as I said the word Gothika, she instantly was like, oh my God, do you remember the scene in the swimming pool? Do you remember when the girl just like started screaming in Halle Berry's face? Like, yes, I do. And I love that. Like, the power of film. Like, my friend's seen this movie once years ago at a sleepover, and she remembers that fright. And I was like, I love it. I love it when that kind of stuff happens. But yeah, it's a good sequence. The whole escape from the cell, I love it. And Halle Berry just kind of goes really feral, and she's just like knocking people over desks, and she's running through doors, and she's just got a mission. She's got to get out. I was trying to talk about a scene with Pete and Miranda earlier, and I realised I didn't follow up on it, but where he's like mending her arm, like, after Not Alone has been scalpeled into her flesh. And she asks him just outright, did we have an affair? And he's a bit taken aback, and he's like, no. And she's like, did you want to? He's, yes. And he's like, did I want to? Yes. It's like, well, why didn't we? And he's like, well, because you were married to the boss. And she's like, well, I'm not now. Very much, implicating Pete, potentially. Could Pete have had a motive for wanting Doug dead? And absolutely, he wanted Miranda. Doug was the main obstacle for that. There's a lot of characters in the film that, interesting side characters that, could all potentially weave into the conspiracy in some way. And I love all of them. I love, like, 90% of this film is set inside the penitentiary as well. And I think they did film this in Canada. I think all interior shots were like an actual previous asylum. I think I'm right in saying that. The exteriors was a school, like a boarding school. But inside it was an abandoned asylum, I'm pretty sure. That kind of setting just does the work for you, you know, like with the right lighting and everything else. Like, it's just inherently spooky, inherently very gothic. And also the title, you know, like we've talked about what it might mean, but gothic literature, gothic fiction usually fixates on female characters in peril, in distress, and female characters that are going through shit, and other characters don't believe them that they're actually going through that shit. So yeah, I like all, you know, the double meanings of it. The score, John Ottman, who's a great composer. I absolutely adore the score to this movie. And I did mention at the very beginning, like, the university connection, just very briefly. When I was writing my dissertation in my third year, very morbidly, I would listen to this soundtrack on repeat as I was writing my dissertation. It was just, like, really good at getting into the mood of, like, hot, scary, gothic horror, like, just to have this soundtrack on repeat. So yeah, that's Gothika.
If anyone complains about me interrupting in this video, I just allowed that to happen.
Yeah,
that
you did.
monologue.
I could run away with this movie. I need you here just to, like, rate it in, because I could talk about this movie all day.
I know, it just kept going on. But no, everything you're saying is very valid as the reasons why you love this movie.
I do.
I appreciate all of these things. Just for me, I don't have that link of watching it early on in my horror watching career.
Yeah. I was like, you know, you love Jason X. I do not have that same fondness for Jason X. We're talking about two very different movies.
Yeah, the difference is I know Jason X is a bad movie.
Let's
be fair, for me, in 2003, 2004, you were watching Gothika, I was watching Freddy vs. Jason.
Yeah, I know, right? That's where we were at.
That's two very, very different times. I was also watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Yeah, because I was around that time. And I remember so a lot of these would have been 2004, 2005, I imagine, because obviously I wouldn't have seen them in theatres because I was 10 years old when these came out.
Yeah.
But we were watching two very, very different genres of horror at the time.
I'm in no way saying that this movie is a masterpiece. You know, like, as I say, it doesn't really progress the supernatural genre in any particular way, but I think it's a worthy addition to the subgenre. It's psychological, it's supernatural. I think it personally works, and if you've not seen it, it deserves a watch. If you did see it back in the day, you thought maybe it was a bit shit, I think it deserves a rewatch. But it's also interesting in terms of where it sits in the Dark Castle filmography, because, you know, again, prior to Gothika, we had House on Haunted Hill, we had Ghost Ship, we had 13 Ghosts, which were like these kind of big, bold, brassy movies. And then following on from Gothika, they did films like House of Wax, and then they kind of delved into, like, non-horror stuff. They did Rock and Roller and a couple of other films, like, away from the genre. So I think Gothika is also quite unique to Dark Castle in a way. Like, it's arguably, like, the most polished of the horrors that they did, maybe up until Orphan, which is, you know, very suspenseful and very kind of dark.
Orphan has to be the most successful, surely.
But I think in terms of tone and vibe, like, Gothika and Orphan are sort of like... I mean, Orphan beats Gothika, like, as a horror film, but, I mean, similar. You know, like, it's brooding and it's menacing and it's creepy and it's twisted as fuck. But yeah, it's like, Gothika is kind of sandwiched between House of Wax and Ghost Ship, which is weird. But it's quite a deep horror. And it ultimately does have an important message. So, happy birthday, Gothika. I think I'm done.
Are you sure?
I think so. Look, I might never have a chance to talk about this movie again. So I want to make the most.
You'll find a chance.
I will find a chance.
The thing is, you got Gothika. Now I get a turn. I have to pick something.
Oh, is that how it works?
Yes, that's how this works.
All right.
To be fair, I think I actually picked Return of the Living Dead, but that benefited both of us.
I did. We loved both.
And I did enjoy rewatching it.
Yes.
I personally don't know when I will next rewatch this. I'll end this by saying it deserves more than 14%.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Just for and the fact that she might have been nominated for, like, worst actress is
Criminal.
Criminal. Absolutely criminal. She,
Yeah.
like, maybe there's some dialogue in there that just doesn't really work, but she is giving it her all throughout this entire movie. Like, Halle Berry always gives it 100%.
She's a great actress. She is. I really like her in this film. She does a great job. All the cast are great. You know, like these are really well established actors. But it's her movie at the end of the day.
But she's in almost every scene.
She literally is. Yeah.
Like 99% of the movie
Yeah.
is Halle Berry.
Is Halle Berry in various forms of distress.
Yeah.
So yeah, kudos to her. Yeah. It's a special little movie for me. It has like a special place in my heart.
Is it?
Yeah.
I feel like,
I know.
yeah, I can tell. I'll always watch it if you want me to watch it.
The thing is, I don't necessarily know when I'm going to rewatch it.
Right.
It's just one of those films that has like a tendency to crop up in my life every
It
now
was
and then.
surprisingly difficult to track down.
On Blu-ray it was.
On Blu-ray it was. But I often see it's on net. I feel like this is one that's on Netflix quite often.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's there. I've definitely seen it
There
on
we
there.
go.
So, anything else?
I think I should stop now.
Oh, you should. Do you have
Yeah.
anything else?
No, I actually don't. I actually like have less than half a page of notes for this.
This is
This
all
is all
just-
memory. This is all just feel.
Feeling.
This is just good.
I have future David who has to edit all this. Like, future David he's sat there just shaking his fist at the screen, just like,
Ah! I'm sick of this movie.
it's like, I'm here about this movie.
Listen to the soundtrack as you're editing it. Get you in the
I've
mood.
never listened to the soundtrack of Return of the Living Dead.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you next week.